as you're speaking about these things, about going to the past and to see into the future and how this all works biblically, even, and going through the dark place in order to birth the light, what would you say? Like, you can see things. You even saw it, you wrote it in a book, the Chinification of the world. What do you feel some of the trajectories are, probable, possible, all the, what trajectories for this, what the Spirit would be saying to the church from your understanding of
Okay,
history?
so Len and I, in the book Rings of Fire, we talk about a grainy future. Grain,
Why?
grainy. So genetic, robotic, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology. That's where technology is going, and it is driving the pace of change in the present moment. We have no idea how accelerated technology is. And there's some, look, I'm all for artificial intelligence, but I happen to love C.S. Lewis, and his space trilogy, which he wrote in the 1930s, is remarkably prophetic for where we are now. If did you read the space trilogy?
I didn't read the space trilogy. I read.
Oh gosh, Stacey, you need to read the
Okay,
whole thing.
I'll read it.
I won't mess it up for you, but the last book, That Hideous Strength, there's basically this power governing this region, and it's mostly governed by artificial intelligence with a human head. So
Wow.
there is genetic engineering going on between human body parts and artificial body parts. And they've already, now people don't realize this. I mean, this is one of the things you got to study in future studies is some of the stuff that's going on in technology. And there already are head transplant operations taking place. Scary. I mean, it's science fiction of 100 years ago is now becoming reality. These
Wow.
are real. I mean, there are just some really scary things going on.
Head
And
transplants?
yeah, yeah, yeah. In
Not
certain,
not
yeah,
just face, not just
no,
face.
no, head, HEAD.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And now, I know that sounds wild, but be that as it may, we are in a time of reckoning. Um, we're seeing both the goodness and the severity of God. There's social upheaval, there's cultural upheaval, but there's a number of cycles that are converging. There are institutional cycles that are converging in the Western world, in America in particular. There are 80-year
Can you
cycles, there
list
are
a couple
50-year
of those
cycles.
cycles? Because, I think it's very important for people to think, especially, what the Spirit is saying to the church. So the church needs to think outside the walls of the church, not what's
Yeah,
just going on in here,
yeah,
but what's going on in culture. And, the Bible does say that, like a woman in birth pangs, and I have had 5 children, and the birth pangs just intensify towards the birth of the child, and the rapidity of contractions. So I think what you're saying is we're seeing these increase of contractions of cultural shift, but we have never, ever, ever seen this speed of change in
not
the.
not in our lifetime.
Mhm,
Never, never, not
mhm.
in our lifetime. And so but change, because everything up until the end of the industrial revolution, there was a lot of change that went on in a lifetime, but everything looked like it stayed mostly the same. Even if I go back 100 years, my grandparents came over from Italy and they bought a house that they lived in from the time they were married till the time they died, and then they turned it over to their kids, and all the grown-up kids had their wives and kids in that house until they were able to afford their own house. By the time the 90s came around, where many of the institutions that were permanent, Ma Bell and AT&T, when they all broke up and the whole downsizing thing happened in the Western world, family units were scattered. So no longer was everybody in the house. Now you had family that had to go to California to get a job, family that had to go down to Tennessee, family that had to go to Europe. And so the only time you saw family was maybe at the holidays, and maybe even then you couldn't because travel might have been restrictive. So many different social and cultural things were happening, but we're going to see it at a much more disruptive rate in the
Mhm.
next 10 years. And the church, what the church needs to learn from, I think, because this is my conviction, the future belongs to the spirit-filled community. You're going to see major changes. Certain denominations will not exist in the next 20 years because they will become irrelevant. But you're going to find what we saw in the charismatic renewal. You're going to find more and more Pentecost is going to become an adjective and not a denomination.